Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip, a cleft palate, or both. You can help our medical volunteers give the gift of a new smile to a child who needs it most. This holiday season, that smile begins with you. Visit wishingforsmiles.ca and change a child's life today.
Years of 24. Events occur in real time.
All right, hey. All right. It's
all right.
Such an exciting day. Hi.
You can hear us, Carla? Everything's good?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Right, great. Are we starting?
We can, yeah.
Mike, do you want to add in terms of like being in the room writing one show versus the next? How does that?
What I was thinking about as Bob was talking was, for me, Nikita was my first entree into professional television creation, and the part of it that I remember most was sitting in the writing room for both shows. But the writing room was you, Joel, and Bob for me, and watching the two of you who had done story for years before that. So you guys, to me, were like an incredible team, doing something that I never really felt comfortable with. I was always fine, when we got into scripts. But I was watching, and I would watch the two of you like banter a story. And Nikita was, unlike 24, every episode had a totally different story. And one of the fun things that the fans might like to know that I found enormously entertaining was that Joel had a drawer filled with strips of paper that were like failed idea, one phrase concepts, like the president's mistress, or Nikita's mother, which were things they threw away because they couldn't do anything with them. In the entire season, when you guys ran out of ideas, when we all ran out of ideas, Joel would go into the drawer, pull out one, and every once in a while it turned into an episode. And that was like, I loved that part of it,
Yeah, desperation was a big part of the show.
Desperation were the two.
Right.
Sean, talk about the similarities and the things maybe you took from Nikita that brought you success on 24.
First of all, I just wish this panel was going to go on for like 5 hours. I'm just so happy to see everybody.
Me too.
Nikita was my first sort of major show, so I was kind of fearful that I was one score away from being let go, and here I am 25 years later. The same thing's true. I'm one score away from being let go. I was two things really stick out as I look at the group here. One is that Joel sat me down before we even saw a note of music and started talking about the international feeling of the show. And I don't know can you hear this? Can you hear this piano? Can you hear a little bit of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We were starting to fool around with themes, and I remember coming in with some really elaborate, theme, and he said, in his own wonderful way, he goes, "Sean, baby," he goes, we got to be simpler. We got to be simpler, and I just remember, and you talked about this character, about her, as you just said, Joel, it wasn't a, just assassin, cold-hearted. There was a lot of heart and some
emotion,
emotion to her. So we found this simple theme for her, which was. And I'm blasting it because it was much more intimate. But then later on, John, you directed an episode. A lot of times when we see an episode, the love story between Nikita and Michael started to form, And one thing I was always grateful to Joel about is he always let me try something really bold. You know, nowadays sometimes we don't get that luxury. And I had an idea for a love theme, and John, I was trying to go through my spotting notes to see which one it was, but I think I got the idea for the Michael and Nikita love theme from something you directed.
It was the first episode, because the first episode was actually the third episode, and it was called Love.
It was called Love.
They were undercover as lovers.
Okay.
And they were being watched, so they even had to make love to
Proof.
pretend that they were together. So that was right off the top, and I think that was one of the best things we did, is do that one right away, because it just kind of set what that relationship was going to be.
And I think I tried that theme kind of early on, and I think, Joel, you actually had the foresight to say, you know, we're not there yet. We're not there. You know, we're not far enough into the evolvement of that. But I started the flavor of it in my mind. Like, in other words, the seed was planted in that moment. And then I think it was later on in the second season, I was allowed to do, you know, I'm gonna blast it, so it's not gonna sound romantic, but it was. So it was this really, and Joel, you allowed me to kind of you know, move about the cabin musically, and we were always trying to keep the international flavor of the show kind of expanding and untraceable. And you know, sometimes I remember in Toronto, you were filming in, you know, supposedly Russia, and you were all over the place. And
Sean, pivot now to starting 24 and how our chemistry and with John and you and me and Bob and Mike kind of all developed a working style, or
well, I would just, you know, there was always a time when you guys were working, and you guys were at the front end of the process. And so I'd always get sort of the product. I don't know what you guys had envisioned. I only know what it ended up being. And sometimes you would call and say, oh man, this didn't come out the way we wanted it. And then I would watch and be like, God, I think this is great. But we did develop sort of an inner dialogue, I thought. You know, Dave's editing, John's direct, and John, you know, I just remember one episode of John directing 24 where he filmed Kiefer going up a flight of stairs from 8 different angles. And I said, why is this interesting? Why does this work? You know, and there was just something about the way we sort of planted the seeds over the 4.5 years we worked on the show, where we were still making things new, but we had sort of a silent kind of communication about, it was almost like a dance partner. I think we were kind of like dance partners, and we were just sort of learning a new set of moves. And I think, if anything, I was the most vulnerable, because I know, Joel, I think this is no secret, you know, Imagine was not ready to sign on to someone like me, because I didn't have any major show under my belt. And you had to really hold the line for me. So I have to say in front of everybody how grateful I was that you did. So,
well, it was all to our advantage.
Yeah. When you signed on, Stephen, were you signed on originally to do the pilot and then carry through, or did you always know that you were going to come in and essentially do half of the 24-hour day, do 12 episodes?
I was signed on to do just the pilot, you know, and no one had very high hopes for this thing. Fox didn't think it was that cool or interesting. We had, you know, 8 or 9 days to shoot the pilot. It wasn't like they were throwing money at us. I think everyone thought it was a bit daft, but you know, once I got the chance, once I was allowed to, you know, make the pilot like that, and it turned out so well, then I hadn't done TV before, actually, so it was exciting to try and do a TV series. Yeah.
Is it true that 24 was the 24th script that you had read or were looking at or considering?
Oh, it was the 24th audition I had.
24th audition
in California, because I had been working as a sort of a child actress in Canada for many years, believe it or not, because I had started at 11 years old.
Popular Mechanics for Kids. I'm a Canadian. Very
yeah.
well.
Yeah. And and so I had basically one shot. My parents gave me one shot to get out to LA and try to make something happen. Otherwise I was coming back and going to school, going to university, college. So I was like, I gotta do something. I gotta make this work. So I got to California, and I had gone on, I felt like a million auditions. And finally, when 24 came around, again, I had kind of gone through audition after audition after audition. And back then, I mean, you just kind of climbed the ranks until you got to that final sort of screen test with you and another actress. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm not going to, again, I've gotten this far, but it's not going to happen. And then I was driving home and they called me and said, turn around because we need to get you in a wardrobe fitting right away because you got the part. And I remember thinking, gosh, how many auditions did it take to get my first real gig? And so I had kept all the scripts on my coffee table at this like rented apartment I was, just kind of staying at temporarily, and I counted through all the scripts, and it was 24 scripts. So I was like, wow, that's not too bad actually. But that wasn't including auditions for films and stuff like that. But for TV pilots, that was the 24th one. So it was kind of weird that it worked out that way. Strange.
Is that your magic number then? Has that come up anywhere else in life? 24?
No, not necessarily, but yeah, but that year, yeah, 24 was definitely my number for sure.
Howard, how did you get involved with 24?
I had just, Stephen said it was an underestimated pilot. I think no one, little engine that could. I was on the overestimated pilot that I just written for Fox called Ball and Chain, and it was very expensive, and it was on the schedule. And I was going to New York because it was on the schedule for the upfronts. And I got a call from Dana Walden, who was the head of Fox, who said, she said, where are you going? I said, I'm going back to New York. I was actually buying a birthday present for my then 8-year-old son, who's now 28. And she said, well, you're not going to New York. Gail changed her mind and picked up this show 24. And she wants you on it wants you to meet Joel and Bob, the creators of the show, tomorrow morning. And she wants you to be on the show. So like the body wasn't even like in the ground, let alone warm. And I was, and I had, but that I went home and watched, Joel and Bob's and Steven's pilot. And I called her and I said, you made the right choice. And then Joel and Bob, I met at Starbucks the next day, in Woodland Hills, not far from what would become our sound stages and our offices. And it really was kind of love at first sight. Those guys, I was kind of the platoon rat in a little bit, in that I'd been the guy who'd been at Fox since X-Files. And so, I think at some level they felt I was being foisted on them, or so it was a little uneasy, but like we kind of had a great instant rapport, and they were insanely generous. I mean, I was so lucky to come onto the show and get to be, if I didn't give birth to it, I got to be kind of the midwife or the adoptive co-parent.
Xander, recently saw you on Republic of Sarah. Great performance there. What did you enjoy about playing George Mason?
Well, beyond the obvious, meeting Sarah Clark.
You just stole one of my future questions. Darn.
Getting our own little spin-offs, all in a going. It was all sort of a confluence of circumstances for me. I didn't even know which part I was being offered. I wasn't clear until I got there, and oh, it's this guy. Oh, okay. And just sort of having a feeling of chemistry with Stephen and everybody else, just sort of bringing my own little sort of ironic, dry, cynical sort of edge to the guy that had been written pretty straight. Because I just thought that would bring the texture of somebody that'd been doing this for a long time, and a little humor never hurts here and there. It was just meant to be a guest star role, and I thought I was playing the guy that got killed, so it was going to be one and done, the O'Neill character. But yeah, and then they seemed to like what I did and wanted to write more for it, and were open to it, and it just became this great adventure. Sarah was in New York, so I drove across country to go get her, to pick her up to start the show.
John, I'm going to start with you. What made you want to write a book about 24?
Interesting question. Basically, there were a bunch of photographers on set, Rodney being one of them, and the crew, basically, Joseph, everyone were always taking pictures. And we were in our 5th year. Actually, we had finished our 5th year. And I thought, 24 fans. I mean, look, we always connected to the internet. We were on the boards. If you remember the boards, we were on the 24 boards, always talking to fans, and we knew how much they loved the show. So it really was just all of us got together and said, what if we put all our pictures that we've been taking for years, for 5 years now, and put them all in a book and tell some behind the scenes stories. And that's how it came about. And then everyone contributed, and it was great. And the thing I loved about the book the most too, at the very back, is every single person that had anything to do with those 5 years, from Brian Grazer to Imagine to the craft service people. And I thought that was like the most important thing, because yeah, the actors are up front and even the directors get a little bit of buzz, but it's all those people behind the scenes that made this show so special. And we were truly a family. So to me, that book was always like a family album that we could all look back on and just go, look at what we did. Look how much fun this was. And so that's kind of where it came about.
Tell me more about the family that 24 was, you know, throughout the run.
Well, this is a great question for everybody, because I think everyone feels the same way. And if you didn't feel the same way, we virtually just killed you anyway, so it didn't matter. So we just kept the people that we wanted in our family. Unlike what you could really do with your real family, you couldn't do that. But I think everybody, because some people were there from the beginning, and then there were people like Mary Lynn and Kim that came later. So we just absorbed everyone into the family as we went. And it was interesting because I think one of the things about 24 that was so different than any other show, they were virtually writing them one show at a time. So basically, as the actors sort of did things that made them survive a little longer, you know, that they were doing things where we're like, oh, this is great. Let's get this person to connect now with this person, which no other show ever did. So it was organic. It was being created as we go. But I think everyone should go around and answer this question.
Can I just add an addendum to what John just said? Because I think that as a family, we had an uncle that kept the family together, and that person was John Cassar.
And an aunt.
He did.
Yes.
Of course. But the parties at his house, the conventions, the enthusiasm, all in his, you know, humble Maltese way. John kept the family together.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I remember the first day walking into CTU when it was just being built in the beginning of the 4th season, and Joel took me through that. I was like, wow, this is like you're building like an entire city and a world within a world. It was amazing, the CTU set when I first saw it before it was built. I was like fascinated, and I was like,
that was the one.
Fun.
That was after we blew the first one up.
right. Yeah, it was right. And they were like, we blew the first one up. I'm like, oh wow. And I went in there and it looked like Disneyland, like a real, like amazing, one of the most amazing sets I've ever been on, actually.
I just think the whole family thing was that this show was a very different show than any other show any of us had been on. You know, the way it was shot also was such a kind of running and gunning. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to get your master and then we're going to get your close up and then we're going to get your close up. It was shot in a really different way, which I think is also one of the many reasons it took up. But I think that also brought us together as a family, because it's like from the minute actually we would rehearse, you know, with these like insane tech dialogue and insane, you know, I'd have like a certain pencil or button thing that I then had to pass over. It was like doing live theater, and you always had to be on. So I feel like because of that, we all, I mean, at least in my experience, the crew and the actors, we were so together, and it was so intense that so also like our downtime was so intense, because I think we all felt like we had each other's backs all the time, and there was no like separation between crew and actors. We were all just this really big family, because it was such a such an all in time, you know. So I think that was one of the reasons why I think, you know, I think we all really, everyone who came, we all really enjoyed each other's company.
I want to say hi to Gary Newman and have Gary.
Hey, yes, Gary Newman. I want to welcome Gary Newman.
Fox. He was the guy when I would say we need more money, we'd go, okay, get that. It had so much to do with the success of the show.
Well, Gary, welcome to the panel. We appreciate you joining us. I guess I have a question for you. So many shows, you know, make it to air and don't make it to air. So what was it about 24 that you and Dana Walden at the time said, all right, 24 needs to go to air, and what made you guys support it throughout its whole run, basically?
So first of all, when 24 was developed, Dana and I were running the studio, not the network. So we were selling the show to the network. I remember sitting in a staff meeting, and one of our young creative executives was talking about the shows that we were developing, and he said, you know, we've got this show from Imagine and Joel Surnow that is going to be done in real time, and everyone in the room, there's maybe 35 people in the room, and just look at him like, you know, what is he talking about? And you know, the questions you would expect about, well, how can that be? What if he needs to sleep, go to the bathroom, drive across town, and so, you know, it was pretty quickly put on the back burner as not a particularly viable project. And then went through the development process, and this incredible script came in, and everyone from the studio, the network, got extremely excited about it. And then the pieces started coming together, the final piece being Kiefer, and all of a sudden this became you know, a project with a huge amount of potential. I remember when the cut came in, and the studio gets it before the network, and I watched it at home, as you know, we did back then, and Dana and I got on the phone with each other and said, holy shit, this thing's unbelievable. And from that point on, it really was kind of charmed. It just glided through the system. It was the best pilot the network had that year. And even though it was such an unusual structure for storytelling, you know, that was a plus. That was not an impediment, and it got right on the schedule.
And did you guys, from a Fox perspective, did you guys ever consider having 24 becoming like a Law and Order or CSI franchise where there would be other spin-offs?
Did you hear that, Gary?
Yeah, I heard it. You know, we really didn't. What did happen, you know, the ratings that first season were not great, and you know, people weren't used to watching TV that way, and so people who didn't get on board early felt like they couldn't get on board. And so at the end of the first season, the network said to us, we think we want to, and if you guys already talked about this, Joel, you can stop me, but they
that's what I brought up about how you guys were brilliant in bringing up the DVD. I had mentioned that.
Yeah, they wanted to turn it into an episodic series, and we all thought that was a horrible idea, but they really were insistent. So I believe Joel and Howard probably wrote a script to show them what an episodic series could be. And my guess is, no, Joel, someone wrote it.
Yeah, Mike and I.
Yeah, okay. And I would say they maybe slightly tanked it, and because no one believed in that. And then the network ordered it. But, you know, I was thinking about this earlier today. And again, if you've already covered this territory, just someone you know, shut off my mic. But before the second season premiered, one of the guys in our marketing department, Stephen Melnick, came up with the idea of, why don't we release the show on, I'm guessing at the time it was VHS. I doubt we had DVD then, 2002. And because the show is great, and if people see it and they see the first season, they'll show up for the second season. And it really had never been done before. And networks were in the business of hoarding these shows, creating scarcity. So the only place you could see it is on that network, and the only place an advertiser could get associated with it was on that network. So no one was used to that happening, and we moved forward with that. We kind of just did it on our own, and figured we'd say we were sorry rather than ask for permission if they didn't like it. But it just exploded with the audience at that point. The DVDs or the VHS tapes just flew off the shelves, and I think it really helped the launch in the second year, where the show really took off and became the juggernaut that it was.
Yeah, and from an audience perspective, I think the serialized nature of the show really worked well. But
well, you know, it was the precursor to what TV is now. It was way ahead of its time, and a show like this in this streaming market would, you know, it would be fantastic, but it would sort of not stand out the way 24 stood out 20 years ago, where no one was thinking that way. I give, you know, enormous credit to Joel and the whole creative team who was involved. They just were way ahead of their time.
I agree. As a fan, I have to say, Joel and Bob and everyone involved, John, Brad, Michael, and Sean, and everyone, you guys are all brilliant writers. You guys are big idea people, and I have to say, you know, I'm obsessed with 24. I love it. It's, you know, we all love it. And was there ever a consideration of like what would 24 have been like if it was not a TV series but a film series like the Bond movies? Like what would that have been with 24?
It wouldn't have been as special.
Okay.
I agree.
mean,
I agree with that.
I mean, I think what made it special is that week to week to week, you got connected to a show and it became part of your life over a period of 4 to 6 months, you know.
Right.
And, you know, a movie is great, but you can't compete with $300 million budget movies that can blow you away and take you on a ride of a lifetime. You know, this is just, these are characters, and, you know, we didn't make our money with action on this show. You know, it was suspense and high stakes, and, you know.
I think that maybe sometimes the production value of that show doesn't get the credit it deserves. You know, clearly Kiefer was an enormous star and an enormous draw, and the writing was spectacular. And every year they had to recreate, essentially a series. But what John and Brad and all the people who were involved on the production side did in 7.5 days or 7 days instead of 8, and to be able to keep that show on the air the way they did was spectacular. We couldn't have been more proud as a studio of the level of the production value we got for the budget we had.
Thanks, Gary. That's nice to hear.
Is there any possibility of ever releasing 24 on a Blu-ray, like the full series on the Blu-ray?
To tell you the truth, I'm kind of shocked it hasn't been. It's now over at Disney. Those rights reside at Disney. They clearly don't have the same attachment to the show that we would have had at Fox. And honestly, I don't know why it hasn't been. It probably should be, and it's something. The next time I'm talking to Dana, I'm going to say something about it.
Well,
Anyway,
Gary,
guys,
yeah,
it's
thank
great
you
to
for
see all
joining
of
us.
you. You should be so proud of this. I know we at the studio, those of us who are, those who are still working there and those who aren't, we're all just, proud of the achievement of the show. It was really remarkable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
See you guys
Thank
as well.
you, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See you, everyone.
All right.
Take care, Gary.
Kind of going back to Jack, is his story finished?
Well, no, because even if it's in the imagination of the audience, they're going to wonder where he's being held. What kind? Has he escaped? What's he going to do? I hope not. I hope that there's some resolution to it personally, but we'll have to see. It's something that I've said. I would never be opposed to entertaining the idea. But I'm not the writer, and someone would have to present me with a script. And but I also think, and I've said this a number of times, that I do believe that the idea is bigger than any one person who was in the show or worked on the show. And I do believe that 24 as a concept will certainly be revisited again.
Yeah. Awesome. A couple times through this last, half an hour or so, you've talked about storytelling. That's something that you've brought up, a few times. So what is it that excites you so much about storytelling?
Every time I say storytelling, Zach Kassar has to have a drink. Storytelling, it's what actors do. It's what you get into it for. And whether they're make believe or whether they're true stories, they're how we understand each other. I can't underplay and understate the importance of society and how we tell stories and how those stories impact and inform our behavior. And so, Chekhov wrote in The Seagull, Trepolov's opening monologue, he writes, "I watch these high priests of sacred art, teach us how to walk, drink, make love, and wear our clothes. They teach us how to live, and they tell us what's cool and what's not cool. And they tell us what's right and wrong. You know, I can go back to Bambi and you know, one of the first movies I ever saw as a person. And I still walk around going, you know, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing at all. That was taught to me by a movie, right?
Yeah.
So it informed me as a young person what was right, what was wrong, how to be. And that to me is what storytelling is. It's us as a society deciding what's important and valuable to us, and it's different in different societies. You know, Asian culture is very different than North American culture, and is very different than European culture, very different than African culture, and so each area, each group, each society, the storytelling is really what defines that culture, and so it's incredibly important, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, that saying from Bambi, I say that to my kids quite often. Just don't say it if it's not nice.
If you don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing at all. That was Thumper's first line. Or
That's
no,
right. Who knew it'd be so, you know?
You know, Kiefer, we thought it was appropriate to have a family reunion, seeing as it's the date, November 6th, 20 years ago today. So we have invited Terry.
Oh my God.
Kim.
Honey.
How are you?
Well, they have real names, but we call them Terry and Kim.
You
Happy
can call me
anniversary,
Kim.
Kiefer.
You can call me Kim. That's fine. I'm good with it.
How are you?
Good.
Where are you?
Leslie, you start.
I'm in Langley. I'm near Vancouver, Kiefer.
Oh my gosh, there you are. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, sweetheart?
You look beautiful. I'm great, thank you. I'm great.
Where are you?
I am in my secret lair. I'm actually home. I'm in Toronto.
Oh, how nice. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
Thank you, and you. What are you doing in Langley, Virginia?
I'm directing here. I'm on a gig here that has me here for another couple of weeks. And
Oh,
I'll be back again
congratulations.
in March.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
It's so nice to see you.
you too.
Rachel and I were talking earlier, and she asked me which was my favorite season, and I love. In all fairness, I loved all of them, but there's not, you know, the first season's the first season, and it's when we kind of discovered everything for the show, and I just, you know, it just brought back so many kind of sweet memories. So yeah.
No,
Can you believe it's been 20 years?
Oh, come on.
Man, that's like getting hit in the face with a shovel.
But you
If Alicia hadn't climbed out the window, none of us would be here today.
Well, yes, and
she just stayed
there was
home.
always that. I remember having conversations with Howard Gordon right to the bitter end, which was, why doesn't anybody just do what I say? If people would just do what I say, no one would be in trouble. And we would laugh about that a lot.
That's for
But
Kiefer
man,
and Jack
so
Bauer.
it's so funny to see Alicia because, you know, she was so young when we started.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to watch, just watch her grow up over the years in doing the show, and just watching her career blossom and all of this stuff. And it was just, but it was very funny because I have a dog who is just a couple of years younger than Alicia. And so it was very interesting for me because I felt, you know, I had a daughter at home, and then when I went to work, I actually felt very protective over Alicia, like a father would. And so, and she was just so amazing. So nice to see you again.
It's so good to see you. And it's so funny because it's interesting. I always would be cautious about, you know, going on other shows after my time on 24 was over, because I'd always, all my references would be the show. And I never wanted to come across that I was like bragging about being on this like big show, but that was my only experience. And I think we kind of touched on it earlier, where when we were shooting 24, the hours and the time we spent together it was so much like a fishbowl. I would go home, sleep, come back, and it would be, you know, they were my family. They were who I, you know, spoke to on a daily basis. I mean, there was no time for socializing or going to dinners. I mean, it was a lot to do with my time. Those 4 years were so dedicated to being on that set, and it was such a huge influence on my career, and Kiefer too, especially. Like, I can't thank you enough, because every show after that, you know, the benchmark of being, you know, the head guy and setting the tone for a series the way you did stuck with me. You know, sometimes it was blatant advice and sometimes it was just me watching you, you know, conduct yourself and be so prepared and
thank you.
And so like, yeah, and really made the other actors accountable, you know. So it was like later on it kind of trickled into all my work and, you know, how to be and how to be professional and just, you know, without it, I mean, I wouldn't be the actor that I am. I mean, it just, you put such a stamp on me, you know, professionally.
Oh,
So
sweetheart, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
And before we start, I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much for my career.
I'll second that, actually.
So, Joel, why don't you take us away? And it's free form, so off you go.
All right. So when Justin first approached me about this whole wonderful convention that we're doing today, I said, you know, you really can't talk about 24 without talking about Nikita, because the prime creative elements that made up the first season of 24 were all sort of gestated and formed in the 5 years that we did La Femme Nikita in the 90s. And so, you know, Bob, Michael Losif, and I wrote almost all the scripts, and we tried to forge an unconventional way of telling kind of an action show. Bob, you can jump in on the writing part of it. I'll go into the other stuff, but why don't you talk a little bit about how the ideas that we had on Nikita sort of extrapolated and went into 24?
Well, of course, Nikita was based on, the concept was based on the movie, in which was an assassin. And we took that sort of German idea and tried to build a show around it. We wanted to be broader than just going around killing people, and we came up with the idea of just sort of a general counter-terrorist operation. I don't know if we even called it that. I don't remember.
Section 1.
Section 1 is what it was called, but I don't remember if we said, oh, we fight terrorists. Maybe we did, but that's what they did, in fact. So we had to think of ideas that went up against some form of terrorists every week, that was a thriller, was something we hadn't really done before, and that maintained, in addition to those elements, maintained some kind of an emotional connection among the characters, and to keep that bubbling week after week. That's what it ended up being. And that certainly led into 24 ultimately, although we never thought of it that way. We never said, oh, someday we're gonna expand this into a show about anti-terrorism across the world and so on. That never was in our minds, but it did. The germ of the idea did come from that, and that's how we got started.
One of the things that I think the three of us didn't want to do is to have shows become action shows. We always thought that if we could do something and avoid action, and that's where the suspense thriller part of it came along. But you know, Bob and I were big John le Carré fans, and we always loved the sort of plot twisty things in a lot of the great thriller writers, especially le Carré. But so with Nikita, it was a love story between Michael and Nikita, and that became sort of a dominant thing. We would do some action, but usually the action would sort of have another element to it that made it more interesting than just running and jumping and shooting. You know, Michael's trying to save Nikita, or there's some person that in there that is a mole that we're going to find out. So you're watching for more than just the footwork. And I think we took that to 24 as well. I mean, wouldn't you say, Bob?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a good point. The whole premise of Nikita was this woman who, on our show, unlike the movie, was innocent. She was not a killer. She was innocent. It was a mistake. And she was having to constantly do things she didn't want to do that went against her natural impulses, but she had to do them to survive. And that created a tension in the show that was there every episode. That wasn't exactly the tension in 24, but we still carried over the idea, I think, that of a hero doing things that he didn't really want to do, but he had to do to save his family, to save innocent people, to overcome some horrible evil that was going to descend on the world. He did not enjoy doing what he was doing. He had to do it. And that created a tension within the character, I think, which was more interesting, as Joel says, than just running around and shooting.
Right. It wasn't James Bond where it's just a good guy going after bad guys. So what we always tried to do on 24 is build family units around all our main characters, whether it was Jack or Palmer, so that every story had some inner tension to do with families, husbands and wives, daughters and fathers, things like that, that added to the again, that was learned from Nikita in realizing you could do a thriller thing and it's also a romance. It's a love story. So that was a really interesting parallel. And then when we got to 24 after Nikita, we were versed in the idea that you have to surprise the audience with your plots. You have to keep it unexpected. You have to always pull the rug out from the viewer and let them know that what you're seeing is not what you think you're seeing. And we did that a lot on Nikita, and we did that a lot on 24.
That kind of leads to my next question. It's really for the three presidents we have in the room. What is the process of becoming presidential? Like, what did you do to assume and step into that role?
I just believed that I was the president. I mean, before I do a take, I said, "You're the fucking president of the United States." Everybody has got to pay attention. And then I'd walk on the set and do it. That's about it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in my case, yeah, I think a lot of it is the writing, and I'm sure Greg would agree. A lot of it is the writing. You know, they write for you, so it's a pretty comfortable fit. I guess I'd played a lot of authority figures and politicians and senators before,
You
so
still
it wasn't
are.
that big of a stretch. Still am, thanks, Greg.
Yes.
And it wasn't that big of a stretch, but again, the writing was the main thing, I think.
I would just say that to me, I joked about the invisible crown, but that's something that I do like to play with in my work, is to just play around. And I remember there was one thing that I did with the VP was to actually, as I'm putting on the suit, pretend it's like a robe, and it's this robe that actually lifted my carriage. I mean, sort of like Greg saying, "I'm the fucking president." It's like, put this thing on. It's like, wow, okay, here we go. And for my guy, because I wasn't actually the president, but I had to make decisions for the president,
right?
With the potentiality of the president being blown up at that point, that this is all going to happen. So for me, there was just a lot of conflicting ideas coming into playing that part, as well as I see that who did Cameron play? The accent threw me off. So also walking on set, well, actually going through the gates. As soon as I ever walk through a gates on a studio, if I'm playing an American, I immediately speak with an American accent and have that going, and that happens all day long. So I find it a lot easier to stay in rather than drop out, come back in, drop out, come back in. It's just easier to just play the whole thing all the way. And so, yeah, putting on the invisible crown, putting on the robes, and acting as if going, yep, this is me, this is who I am, and you bastards better watch out.
I've got to just tell a Cherry Jones story, and apologies. She was supposed to be here and her schedule changed at the last second, and so unfortunately she wasn't here. But there's a great story where we're shooting the inauguration of a female president, and anytime, and it has nothing to do with the actor's ability. If it's a long speech, and an inauguration speech is a long speech, I have a teleprompter ready just in case if an actor wants to use it. And I remember going up to Cherry Jones and saying, same thing. Look, I've got it, and I've got it ready. If you want, it's there. If you need it, great. If not, it's not a big deal, but it's ready. And she looked at me and she goes, "John Cassar, how many women get to play the president of the United States?" And she said, "Trust me, I got this." And so she had
amazing.
It was
amazing.
An incredible inauguration speech. I'd vote for her, like you said, Chris. We'd vote for her now.
I'm Canadian. I'd vote for her.
Yeah, no worries. You got my vote.
Yeah,
Also,
she was great. She was
She
really
has
wonderful.
a gravitas to her, I think, in general, that comes with wisdom. And because she's so humble and kind, and she doesn't walk on a set and expect anything special, but she's so wise. You know what I mean, John?
Yeah,
That to me was very presidential.
Here's something you're not going to believe. She virtually pulled me aside because remember, she hadn't done much television. I don't think any. I think we were the first kind of television show for her. And she pulled me aside and she said, "You're going to have to help me through this. I don't know how this television stuff works." And I said, "Dude, you're Cherry Jones. You've been in these great movies. You're a theater, you know, there's no one better in theater. You're Cherry Jones." She goes, "I know, but this TV thing, it's so fast, so many words. I hope I can do it." Yeah, she could do it. She was fine. She didn't need much of my help. She was great, but she was nervous, amazingly enough.
John, that seems like the right time. Do you want to hear one more voice? Can we add one more voice to the proceedings?
Sure.
John's looking at me like, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?"
Thank you for giving me the opportunity
Oh.
to talk to you, because I'm not going to be able to be there live with you all. And so I just wanted to say hello to the fans and hello to my friends in the Oval Office, all the wonderful people that I got to work with who are with you. I know you said Chris is going to be there and Glenn's going to be there and Sprague's going to be there. And so hello, everybody. And hello to the fans. And I really would love to. We had some fun in that Oval Office. I missed that Oval Office.
What drew you to even being a part of 24?
Well, quite honestly, a phone call from my agents that the producers wanted to meet me. I'd been touring. I'd done I'd done many months of starring in Doubt on Broadway, which I played Sister Aloysius, who was a nun of granite. And it was sort of a lateral move to go from Sister Aloysius to the President of the United States.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
The principal of a Catholic school, and it was a lateral move. And I remember I went in and I met the fellas, and I enjoyed them all so much, but it wasn't a very long meeting. And then I went back to the car that they had waiting for me to take me back to the hotel, and then because I live in New York. And I got the call in the car on the way back to the hotel that they wanted me to play the president. And honestly, my very first thought, Ryan, was I was on the freeway looking at all these cars zooming by, and I'm a New Yorker and I don't drive. I know how to drive, but I haven't had a car as an adult. And I remember thinking, I'm going to have to drive. If I say yes, I'm going to have to drive on this, freeway. But then, of course, I was thrilled. And quite honestly, it was a miracle in my life because I'd done 8 a week as a theater actress my whole life.
Right.
And my parents were both in steep declining health. And 24 allowed me to be with my parents 2 weeks every month the last 3 years of their lives.
Wow.
And when the writer's strike happened, my mother had just had a major stroke, and I was able to be with her for several months after that stroke. So it was like the most perfectly timed gift professionally of my life. And I will always be so grateful to Howard and to John and the gang. And I tell you, that crew, I would just like to sing the praises of that crew. Because, you know, the actors would pop in and out. We'd pop in and out. We'd do our 2 or 3 days. And then they would go to the next plot. And that group of actors would come in and do that plot. And they would shoot two at a time. So I would come in and shoot my things and be gone. But that crew was there every single day. And it was usually very long days. And they were, and by the time I got there for season 7, you know, it was the most beautifully oiled machine you'd ever seen in your life. And people had fallen in love on that set. People had babies on that set. People had died, you know, who not on the set, but they'd lost loved ones. You know, I mean, it was, and so they were such a close group of people.
Has there been a reaction when you've walked down the street and run into somebody that was a fan that recognizes you from 24? Has there been a good or or not maybe a crazy reaction to seeing Nemesis on the street?
I used to go golfing with Dennis Haysbert. And he's pretty visible coming at you. And people go, "Oh my God, you!" And then I'd show up after the meeting. "Oh my God, what are you doing with him?" And I didn't take it personally, but it was very telling, very telling. Yeah,
couldn't separate the real from the
no,
fiction.
The good president and the other president.
The other president.
I had
anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to share my golfing story with Kiefer that makes me chuckle is playing at a place called Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
And we were in the pro shop and this tour bus pulled up and there was a group of Asian tourists who got out and they turned and they looked towards him. And I just said, "Try this on." We were playing around. He had this big floppy golf hat and they all looked our way and went, "Ah!" and screamed and ran to, and I just went, "Oh, here we go." They knocked him out of the way and came to me because they'd seen me on another show. And then we went and played golf. And actually, an interesting piece of casting trivia, they were talking about, I think Fox were talking about the reboot in London. And Kiefer had said that Fox wanted to cast, I'm not going to mention who it was, but a particular actor in the role of the Prime Minister. And I brought Stephen Fry to set a few years before, and I knew how much of a fan Stephen was. So I said, "What about Stephen Fry?" And he said, "Well, would he do it?" So I pulled out the phone, called Stephen, said, "Hey, Stephen, 24, Prime Minister, interested?" He went, "Oh, good grief. Yes, absolutely. Of course he's interested. We'll tell him that we'll work it out." So that's how fast that particular piece of casting happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got one.
Yeah.
I used to go to the airport and kids would run up and want autographs. I'm talking about 6-year-old kids to whatever. And the parents would be like, be careful, be careful. But one time I'm on one of those, not the escalator, the thing that carries you, and this guy, business suitcase. And as I'm going by him, he literally just, his mouth went agape and he dropped his suitcase and he's looking at me like that, and I'd walk in and people would look at me like, "Oh my God, there's a terrorist in this airport," It was funny.
Here's the second part of my question. Do you enjoy getting that reaction? Do any of you, see it, have that happen and it kind of gives you a little bit of a thrill? Like, ooh, they know me from.
Yeah, the joy for me is being searched. And the people searching me saying, "Man, I loved you on 24. You were great." And they're searching for, everything on me. That was kind of fun.
No one's ever come up to me. But I will say that I got one of those Peloton bikes years ago, those exercise bikes. And I went to New York and I said, I'm going to take one of those classes, that they broadcast. And there was one teacher, I like this guy, I forgot his name. And I went up to him afterwards and he goes, "Hey, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a composer." I said, "I worked on the show 24. And he goes, "Oh man, I watched that when I was a kid, And I felt just horrible because I've been doing this for 22 years. He goes, "That was my favorite show when I was in grade school." And I said, "Right on, man. F you." No,
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that.
That was nice. No, but he knew the show, and anybody who knows the show, it's always nice to hear a shout out about it,
I live in Iceland now, and the show was very popular here, and I do get recognized a lot. And one guy who's sort of in his cups one night came up and Silverov, and starts speaking Icelandic to me.
Expecting you would respond.
Yeah.
Do you know, I still remember the two lines because I had to speak different languages. One was "Abmen Buddhas Robleno no Proteo Chochodino," and there was a dialect coach, and I swear to God, every time I did a take, I was spot on, and he'd come over and go, "No, Chochodino," and I go, "Chochodino," he'd go, "No, Chochodino," and this would go on for about 10 minutes. I still don't think I can get the line right, but I remember it.
Oh, I've got a good one. I've got one. There was a scene where my limousine has just been blown up, and I'm walking away from it on the phone, and I'm talking to one of my people, and they said, "Just speak some Russian while you're walking away." Now I don't speak Russian, so they said, "Well, just make it up, just speak gibberish. So I'm like, all nonsense. Nobody ever busted me on it. Now, here's the thing. They told me that they were going to replace it in post. And now we'll get another actor when we do ADR to a Russian, and we'll put real Russian in there. Never did it. Never busted on it. You can hear. And also, we were at Kathleen Gotti and I were at Glenn Morshower's house. We used to watch the show every week. Several of us would get together,
That's cool.
and which was great. And that scene comes in, and I can't believe they left that in. Oh my God! Now Kathleen speaks Russian, and she's, what do you mean? I said, I'm speaking fake Russian. She said, oh really? I thought you were speaking real Russian. So I fooled her somehow, and you know, I just never been busted on it, which amazes me.
Bravo.
One of the just a story comes to mind. One of the great things about 24 was having done shows on the phone. There was a lot of scenes on the phone. On 24, the phones were live and real, and we had those conversations. There was no one off screen kind of reading lines. So one day we were on location filming with, I think it was Carlos, Kiefer, and I, and we had to be offset because we were on the phone. So, and there were other scenes to do. So we went down to the local Chili's. And we sat at the restaurant bar, just having food and having, you know, a cup of tea or coffee or whatever. And then Carlos's phone went, he got text first, like, and then he did his scene and we were quiet. And then I did my scene and I was quiet. And then Kiefer did his, and no one in the restaurant knew that we were filming, quote unquote, 24 at the time.
Wow.
Let's switch to Shora. Shora, the allegiances and loyalties of Dina Arras are very clear. How did that affect your family dynamic on the show?
Well, to be honest with you, that the show proved to me that the concept of family in a traditional sense is, from its early time till now, has been remained the same. Man and his wife, children, values, family value systems, do's and don'ts. Hasn't changed at all. And we're still bound with the same rules. As Jane Austen would put it, it's universally accepted. And therefore, when we started working on it, I noticed that being a terrorist, being a predator, being whoever you are, won't make a difference in running a household. And what she did for me was this multi-layered character. The main reason I joined 24 was not just because it was an amazing show, amazing cast and crew, and really it was number one, and I still think it's an own genre. But the main reason was the fact that I could see all these multi-layered characters at work, and I thought, I may be able to do a good job on this one. And I realized that as a mother, as a wife, as a lover, as a believer, as a terrorist, I'm still obeying the same rules as my ancestors did in the old days. And no matter what, we're living by it. And it's interesting. Everybody, it had some backlash on me, especially from my own people. They weren't happy with me portraying this terrorist, and kept talking here and there and telling me that you're giving us a bad name. And obviously I argued with them. But what it taught me was, it doesn't make a difference who you are. If you're a wife, if you're the head of a household, then you're gonna have to do your job no matter what. Years later, to my dismay, I found out that there was a family. Apparently there were a couple of families that were captured, and they've been living in the US for generations, but then they were captured because they were spying on us for decades. So all of a sudden, the whole story of 24 became even more real to me. That yes, we're running a household here, we're having a family here, and Nestor knows. I kept telling him, "You're my beloved TV husband, Nestor." And but still, you got to do what you have to do.
Jack Bauer has faced how many enemies and bad guys. I mean, he has faced Chinese agents, he has faced American oil businessmen, he has faced Russian. I know that people tend to maybe single out your roles as Middle Eastern. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's actually harms or does more harm than good?
No, I don't believe so. And the fact is that, you know, every decade, every few decades, we find a new villain. And usually these, remember, there used to be Vietnamese, Japanese, Russian, a lot of those we saw in James Bond movies. Now it's Middle Eastern, and it's a sort of a reflection of the reality in the mirror of the screen, silver screen. So my answer to those who told me that my role was such a stereotype, and my answer to them was, there is no such a type that I could be the stereo of it. I created this character.
Yeah.
Therefore, we were just speculating here. We're imagining. We're using our imagination here as to what will happen if a family is into terrorism. What happens? Then what are the relationships like? Are they?
And you did a great job. You both did a great job. Nestor, did Navi have any qualities that you admired?
So first of all, I'm celebrating my 66th birthday. I'm in my car.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. But my family is in a restaurant, and so I'm in a car. So that's why I might look a little spooky and
sorry, we're sorry.
Did you just pretend you went into the washroom
I'm
and now
happy
you're
to take some time out. John, what's up, baby?
Hey, Esther. I love you. The most dramatic lighting yet on this on any panel we've had. and you're in a car. It's so 24.
I really did admire the fact that he was loyal to what he was, you know, his aims and his goals. Unfortunately, I don't agree with his aims and goals, but I do admire his feelings and goals for his goals. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, we all have to kind of try to figure out what we're doing in life, and we try to figure out what it is that for example, my kid, you know, those are the kind of things that you achieve. And unfortunately, you know, Navi Araz and the family, Sheree, I love you, baby. But you have to have a set of goals that you try to achieve for your children. And that's what I try really hard to do.
Dayton, your book, 24 Trial by Fire, is on the total other end of the spectrum by taking place when Jack is in his mid to late 20s, which has never been seen before. What process did you go through in molding a young Jack Bauer?
Well, that wasn't the plan. The original plan was I was going to follow Jim Swallow and Dave with a third book set between season 8 and Live Another Day. And that's the outline I submitted to Fox. They love the outline, but somebody somewhere in that chain of approvals decided a prequel would really be cool at this point in time. So they gave me the parameters. They had envisioned in their head Jack Bauer as River Phoenix's version of Indiana Jones. So completely raw and new. And so I pushed back gently, and I was reminding them, you know, he was an LAPD cop. He was a special forces guy. He has experience even before CTU. So that comparison doesn't quite work. So we settled on the idea that he would be a young CIA agent on his first field assignment under the tutorship of tutelage of a more experienced agent. And of course, things go completely wrong, as they always do on 24.
As always.
So I basically, the story that I submitted was going to be set on Okinawa as part of the continuing, you know, between season 8 and Live Another Day. So I kept all of that, but by setting it in the 90s, it actually benefited me greatly because I was stationed on Okinawa in the late 80s. So I was able to draw more on memories of the area, the military bases and the surrounding towns and the people there. So that actually helped out quite a bit.
Tara, hi. You spent a good amount of time documenting and really telling some great behind-the-scenes stories during the filming of 24 through the first 6 seasons, companion novels, as well as the 24 official magazine. What was your experience working behind the scenes of 24 and being able to document those interviews and stories?
Yeah, well, these books were my very first solo books. So they're really, really special to me because of that. And then also I couldn't have had a better show and a better family of people. I mean, I was watching a little bit of the segment before and it was like, oh my gosh, it's like, a visual yearbook. These people that I spent a lot of time with, because it was a really generous set in that I came in about season 5. And so I spent a lot of time in the Western White House set, and I, was able to go to a lot of locations with the team and see how they worked and build relationships, that I still have to this day with a lot of the people that work below the line and the cast. And it was the most I've ever been to a television show set. I would go to Chatsworth a lot to be able to document the seasons. And it was really just wonderful. It was, they were this own little microcosm studio set. It was an old warehouse that they had turned into writers' rooms and the standing stages out in Chatsworth. So, I'd come in to town, drive out in my little rental car to this weird little space that, was an outlier all to its own and its own 24 ecosystem, set up in the publicist's office, and then just run around for days talking to people. I do up to sometimes, 40 interviews in 2 days with everybody over there, and then, head out and go do a set visit, for maybe the finale of a season, or, I remember we went to the old LA Times printing warehouse, which was a huge set piece for, I think it was season 6, where you just, you never know where you were going and you always had a great adventure. And I really got to see the nitty gritty of how that operation worked, the friendships, what that, imbued into the story, and to what we all loved about the show was watching, the characters that managed to live, be around for a long time, and watching Kiefer's journey. And so, there is no better way for me as a solo writer, writing books and companion books, to really have the best experience with that group of people, from John Cassar, who, often had me on his sets, to everybody in all the department heads, to the actors who were really ingratiating and spending time with me. I remember Carlo Rota plopped me onto a dolly once, so as we were waiting, and just rolled me around the set. And it's just like, they were so sweet and so kind. And I was, I was a producer of television, so I knew what they did. It wasn't like I was, learning, but I was really ingratiated into a culture that you can see when you see everybody having, in the prior segments and the ones that'll happen later on today, they love each other. They still do. They've all gone off to do other things, but it was really wonderful to get a really insider's view of why the show was so great on the inside and the outside.
That's awesome, and those are some awesome stories. Your novel, The Tao of Jack Bauer, is really a character study on the character of Jack Bauer and the world of 24. What about 24 made you to choose to write a novel about it?
Yeah, so the book is really it's more of a nonfiction, really analyzing the issues that the show addresses. So I wrote this during law school, so I'm an attorney now. And, this is the first post 9/11, drama dealing with issues like terrorism and torture. And I think it's just a critical show for, understanding those issues and visualizing torture, right? Before 24, you'd read about torture in a book, but seeing Jack Bauer torture someone, or seeing Jack Bauer get tortured, and then of course all of the ethical, moral, legal dilemmas that the characters find themselves in. It's just a fascinating show. There's so much to dissect, and that's really what I tried to do with the book.
20 years of 24. Thank you for social distancing.